There are some passages in the Bible that just sort of jump out at you and pretty clear what they mean, pretty clear what to do with them. Then there are other passages like the one we have today, which is kind of deep and requires some thought. And as we're going to see today, really require the Holy Spirit to understand. And so my prayer this morning is that you would discipline your mind and your heart as we come to God's Word to not just sort of go for the quick, low-hanging fruit. Tell me the 3 things I need to do. But that this morning, as we come to this section of 1 Corinthians, we would have our hearts enlarged, that we would have our minds enlarged, that we would understand God more. And that as we understand Him more, our hearts would be filled with worship, and that would propel us forward into everything else that we do in life. That's my goal. Let's read the passage and ask God for His help. We're continuing this line of thought. Now we're in chapter 2, verse 6. I'll give some background as we go. Paul continues to write, "Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom." He's been talking about wisdom, the message of the cross, and the foolishness of this world's wisdom. "We do impart wisdom, although it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age, who are doomed to pass away. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this. For if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, no ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love Him. These things God has revealed to us through the Spirit. For the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except the spirit of that person which is in him? So also, no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Now, we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given us by God. And we impart this in words, not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person judges all things, and is himself to be judged by no one. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. God, we pray one more time as we open your word that you would accompany it with the Spirit's power. God, give us your Spirit this morning in full measure. Open our eyes to this text, and not just the words, but the meaning behind it. That we'd understand your glory, that we would bask in it, that we would live in it, that we would delight in it, we would treasure it. And help it to move us, Lord, in the process of being image bearers who worship you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. So we have been talking about the gospel in this series. The gospel is at the core of life. The gospel is the core defining message of our lives. And at the center of the gospel is the cross of Jesus Christ. Of the circle of the gospel, that's at the center, like the bullseye is the actual cross of Jesus and what it means for us in our lives. And what Paul has been trying to drive at in this book is that Christians should understand more than anybody, if they understand God at all, they should understand more than anybody how dependent they are for God's saving power in their life. If you're a Christian, he's saying you should understand more than anybody the need for salvation that only God can do because you know yourself. The Corinthians should know this. The church should know this. And yet in the Corinthian church, there was this worldly way of relating to one another and assessing and judging each other. And this idea of success and status and achievements that had blended its way into the church. And Paul's trying to correct that to get back to the beginning. The gospel is at the core. The gospel is at the core. Push it all to the side. Have the gospel at the core. And he's going to show us today from this text 4 different things we need to understand, 4 levels of understanding that we get from this passage, this contribution to his argument. So I'm going to give them to you all up front. They're going to be on the overhead, but here's what they are. First, what we need is God's wisdom. It's going to be his first main point. What we need is God's wisdom. Second, what God gives us to know him, to know his wisdom, is God. What we need is God's wisdom. What God gives us to know this God, to know this wisdom, is God. Third, what we can't get on our own is God's wisdom, which is why God gives us God. Fourth, having been given God, we give the wisdom of God to each other. That's what the church does. So first, let's look at these one at a time. First, what we need is God's wisdom. What we need is God's wisdom. If you've been here at Grace over the last few weeks, if you've been going through 1 Corinthians, you know that Paul, who wrote this letter, he's an apostle of Jesus. He's been talking about 2 different groups of people. There's the people who are being saved and the people who are perishing. Being saved by God's grace, and those who are being perished. They're perishing. They're in the act of being destroyed. Every human being falls into one of these 2 camps. On the day of judgment, which is coming, one group will be sheltered from the wrath of God. That's the group that's saved. Another group will be exposed and vulnerable with no protection, and they will perish. To the one being saved, the cross is like a shield, guards them, it protects them. It's the power of God. To the one who is perishing, the message of the cross is foolishness. It's lame. It's ridiculous. How could you believe in something so foolish as that? Why would anyone believe? Why would anyone believe that there's anything eternally significant about what took place now for us 2,000 years ago at the crucifixion, the execution of Jesus, when he's mocked and he's spit upon and he's left to die like a hardened criminal? Who would believe that that has eternal significance? That counts more than anything you can do in your life? Does seem a bit unusual. But the answer that the Bible gives for why anyone should believe that is quite simply, it is the expression of the wisdom of God. On that cross, God's wisdom was being put on full display. His plan of redemption was coming to a climax as the wrath of God was poured upon Jesus on that cross, so that sinners who have no other chance can find their hope in him. And so he writes in verse 6, yet among the mature, we do impart wisdom. Doesn't look like wisdom. Looks kind of foolish. Although it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are doomed to pass away. We impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. Every culture loves its philosophers and its poets, its thinkers and its songwriters. We're no different. Every culture loves the people who paint for us their picture of how life works. Sophocles in Oedipus Rex wrote, fear? What is a man to do with fear? Chance rules our lives, and the future is all unknown. Best live as we may from day to day. It's his conception of the world. John Steinbeck in East of Eden wrote, and this I believe, that the free exploring mind of the individual human is the most valuable thing in the world. And this I would fight for, the freedom of the mind to take any direction it wishes undirected. Taylor Swift in 1989 writes, 'cause baby, now we got bad blood. You know, we used to be mad love. So take a look at what you've done, 'cause baby, now we've got bad blood. Hey. So we have our philosophers and our songwriters and our thinkers that are painting for us a picture of the world. And we stream their music and we listen to their TED Talks. We get on their podcasts and we listen to them pontificate about the way that life works. And if they're not Christians, the way that life works without God. And the way that life works without God at the center is extremely limited perspective. We see first in verse 6 that we're limited in time and space. There is a wisdom, he says, of this age. It's of this time and of this place where we exist. It's fascinating if you read books from other generations. I don't know how many of you do that, but maybe you should try reading a book from a different generation, a different culture, a different time period. Maybe you could read something from like the Civil War era. You're going to see cultural values and priorities rise up that are different than ours. Because each generation is limited by time and space, and each one comes and goes. The wisdom of 2018 will be long gone and forgotten 250 years from now. So we're limited by by where we are. We're limited by our senses. In verse 9 it says, "What no eye has seen, and no ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him." The reality is that we can only know what's been revealed to us. We can only know what we've been given. You trust that I'm up here, I hope, because you can see me. Or you can hear my voice if you close your eyes through these speakers. So you believe that I exist on this stage. But the people who are in Tokyo, they don't know that I exist unless they're listening to it on live stream. Thanks, Jeff. They can't hear me. They can't see me. And so there's a limitation by our senses. We're also limited by access. Verse 11, it says, "For who knows a person's thoughts except the spirit of that person which is in him? So also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God." See, no matter how much you think you know another human being, no matter how much you think you know about your husband or about your spouse, you only know a fraction. You only know a small glimpse. You have no idea what I'm thinking right now. It's pretty funny. You don't know what I'm feeling right now. I don't know what keeps you up at night. I don't know what drives you to your knees in prayer. The only one that has access to that kind of intimacy with you is you. The only one who knows the depths of your thoughts and your dreams and your fears is you. We are limited in what we know. And Paul is saying, as he's describing this wisdom of God that we need, don't confuse your limitations for God. He is not limited like we are. He's not limited by time and space. He says in verse 7 that this word of the cross is this secret and hidden wisdom that was decreed before the ages. Didn't just sort of like come to pass. No, it stretches out into every generation that has come up until this point when Christ is revealed and he's crucified on the cross, and extends all the way out into the end of time until God gathers his church up. This is the story of redemption that's now been revealed. And if you haven't thought about signing up for the class that's starting in 2 weeks that Greg and Keith are going to teach on the story of redemption, it will blow your mind and it will enlarge your faith to see how the Bible is really one big interwoven story of God's revelation of these secret things. He's not limited by time and space like we are. He's not limited by created senses. So we think about this. There's no other way that we engage the world other than through seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling. Our senses, through our senses, we make sense of everything around us. And we take it in, and we order it, and we make sense of it. God knows no bounds. His wisdom is beyond what we can fathom. His plan for salvation is beyond what we can comprehend. The joy of the cross and all that it will secure for us on the final day cannot properly be assessed with the limited faculties that we've been given. but that doesn't make it untrue. Quite the opposite. What Paul is saying here is that salvation, if we think about it through our senses, salvation in the cross of Jesus is brighter than the brightest sun. It's sweeter than the sweetest sugary treat. It's more memorable than any other melody line. It is the most pleasant fragrance and the most comforting touch of a friend. It exceeds our senses. He actually goes back to the Old Testament and quotes from the prophet Isaiah in chapter 64, verse 4, when he writes in verse 9, "What no eye has seen, no ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him." And you need to get this. Isaiah 64 and 1 Corinthians 2, verse 9, is not first about heaven. It's first about the cross. The mystery that's now been revealed, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no heart could imagine what God has prepared in the cross to bring those to him who will love him. And then in the cross, prepare for us joy unimaginable forever, so that our senses will be blown as we take in God in heaven. He's unlimited, even by access, verse 11. "For who knows a person's thoughts except the spirit of that person which is in him? So also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God." Now, I said earlier that the only one who knows you is you, but you don't even know yourself perfectly. You deceive yourself. You lie to yourself. It's part of what sin does. It muddies our understanding even of the closest person that we know, ourselves. Paul says the Spirit knows God perfectly. He knows everything about God perfectly. He knows what he's created and every purpose and every plan perfectly. So he is uniquely equipped to share God's heart and his mind. Now let me ask you this. Who are the ones in this passage to whom the secret, hidden, glorious, beyond comprehending wisdom of God is revealed to? Who are the ones that have received this wisdom? You can look in verse 9 and say it's to those who love him. Which, again, the Bible's all written together in context. So this context is built into what's come before it. Those who love him is connected to chapter 1. Those who are called by him. Or we could see in verse 6 a different description. To those who are mature. Or we could look down at the end of the passage in verses 15 and 16, and we could see those who are spiritual, those who have the mind of Christ. Who are these ones? And there were these 4 different categories? No, these are all one category. There are 4 different ways to describe a Christian. This is written about Christians. If you're a Christian, it means, on some level, that you've come to understand that the cross is the most important thing about you. Because the cross is the place where God deals decisively with the most significantly thing wrong with you. I just made up words as I'm going here. The cross is the place where God deals with your deepest problem. The cross is the place where God punishes your sin. And the cross is the place where you commit your life to following the person who's on it. Jesus. So if you understand that, you're described here as the mature. Those who have received this wisdom. Those who are loved. Those who love God. Those who are spiritual. Which means that once again, there's only 2 groups. Those who have received the joy of the gospel and those who haven't. Those who are mature, Christians, and those who are by implication immature, meaning those who haven't believed on Jesus. There's only 2 groups. And Paul says, if it were any other way, the rulers of the world would not have crucified the Lord of glory in verse 8. Meaning, if they had known that Jesus was the creator of the sun and of the moon and of the oxygen and of the dirt and of the bugs and of the rain, they would have worshiped him instead of whipping him. They would have served him instead of scourging him. They would have joined him instead of judging him. But there are two groups, and only one of them has received this wisdom. So first, we need God's wisdom, and God's wisdom has been revealed in the cross. It's just driving this home. I want you to see, before we move to the second point, the end of verse 7, why he does this. Why this gospel has been hidden and now revealed, this secret hidden wisdom for ages, now revealed, it says, for your glory. For our glory, it says. For our glory. You would think it would say for his glory, and ultimately it is for his glory, but he receives the glory by giving us the glory of knowing Jesus Christ. The greatest privilege any human being can know. So we need to know God's wisdom. And second point, what God gives us to know his wisdom is God. Now this is like such a mind-blowing truth. And this was one of those sermons, I'm just going to be honest, I'm writing this going, I don't know how to make sense of this, to tell you how to make sense of this. So I'm doing my best. The great news about this passage is that it tells us that the Spirit is what teaches us. So I'm praying, Spirit, teach through this. Because the reality of this passage is that it takes God, takes his Spirit for us to understand the cross. There's two groups, and he's saying it takes the Spirit for the one group to understand the cross. And if you remember from last week, I don't mean like that the cross happened, the historical facts. I mean the meaning of the cross. Paul says now in verse 10, look with me in verse 10. He says, these things, this secret wisdom that's now been revealed, God has revealed to us through the Spirit. Doesn't come any other way. Through the Spirit, he says, for the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except for the spirit of that person which is in him? So also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Verse 12, now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given us by God. If you've been a Christian for a long time, please, for just a moment, try to remember that, like, what this would be like to think about this for the first time, okay? That God gives himself to you in the form of a Spirit that you would know him. That's what it's saying here. So the Corinthians are puffed up with all this worldly philosophy and pursuing worldly ambitions. And Paul says, you need more than a new teaching. And you have more than a new teaching here. You have God himself in you. For no one can comprehend the thoughts of God except for the Spirit of God. If that's true, think about it. If that's true, then how in the world are any of us supposed to know God? Well, he gives us that Spirit. At the end it says, the mind of Christ. We need God. God gives us God. God gives us himself by giving us his Spirit, the one who is equal with the Father, equal with the Son, the divine light to illuminate our paths. He gives us the Spirit to understand the cross. This is the main point of this passage. The power of the cross can only be understood and comprehended by those to whom God has given his Spirit. That's the big ticket theology lesson for today. And it's a two-step process. He's got the cross, and then he's got the work of the Spirit. It's 2 steps. I was trying to access my bank account online the other day, and even though it was my account, I couldn't get into it. It made me, for security reasons, do a 2-step verification to just ensure that it was mine. And so I got my 6-digit code like you get, put it in, and then I was able to see the balance. this passage teaches us that it's not enough for God to conceive of the wisdom of the cross and bring it to pass into history. He must do that. But there is a two-step process in order for us to understand it. It must be revealed in history, and then it also must be revealed to us in our hearts by the Holy Spirit. In other words, we need God, and God gives us God. And what's the purpose of all of this? So that we can know the eternal, living, immortal, invisible, almighty God. Today, here, in this room. Personal God. Not just know things about God. We can know Him. We can know His mind. We can know His thoughts. We can know what He loves. We can know what He hates. We can have fellowship with Him. We can commune with Him through the Spirit. As the Spirit knows the depths of God and He gives us that Spirit, we too now can pray and hope in the one who exists outside of time and space and yet at the same time dwells intimately within us, who's taking His dwelling place up inside of us. Pretty easy to get, right? Pretty easy to understand. Let me just review in case we're lost, okay? Here's the logic so far. We're limited. God's limitless. God's gospel is ageless. It's mind-blowing. It's been revealed to us in the Spirit to those who are Christians, the mature, the ones who are loved, the ones who are called spiritual. And the reason why that's important is because no one comprehends God except for through the Spirit of God. And so now in verse 12 it says He's given that to us that we might understand the things freely given us by God, namely the cross and the gospel and all of the things that hang on it. You see the two-step process? So this is what's been my meditation this week. God's wisdom brings the cross to pass, and then God gives us Himself in order that we would see what He's revealed to us about the things He's already given us, the cross, in order to save us from His wrath. In order to save us from perishing, in order that we would be saved. And if it couldn't go a layer lower, oh no, it does. Look now at our third point and consider verse 14. What we can't get on our own is God's wisdom without God giving us God. I will admit, sometimes when I read the Gospels and I read the epistles and I read Paul, he's very dense. He says the same things repeatedly. He kind of circles around things, comes back to things. Sometimes you can read it and just be like, man, that's like, you've said that already. Like, why would you write that again? Like, why are you just piling it on? There's nothing more to be said on this topic. And if you stop there, you miss what is there and why he does write it. There is more to be said. Paul wants to drive home this one key point, that our utter dependency for salvation rests on God. Yes, this is how God has chosen to do it, and there isn't any other way. It's not just that this is how it works, it's the only way it can work. So he contrasts the natural man, the one without the Spirit, with the spiritual man, the one who has the Spirit of God, and he wants us to understand the miraculous power of the Spirit. Verse 14, he says, the natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they're folly to him. And he's not able to understand them because they're spiritually discerned. Here's the shocking truth of verse 14. Those without the Spirit are not just lagging behind a little bit from the others. No, those without the Spirit are blind, cannot see, unable to see. Now, any good mom and dad of young children can tell you that there is a large degree of difference between permission and ability, right? Permission and ability. So when your child says, "Can I go to the bathroom?" and you cleverly say, "I don't know. Can you?" Ha 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 ha. Or you say, May I go to the bathroom? What you're trying to communicate is the difference between permission and ability. Well, which one is he talking about here? Paul says, natural man, the man or woman or child without the Holy Spirit is not able. Not able. Not able equals inability. Not permission, inability, not able. It's actually the word dunamai, where we talked about last week or the week before about power. This is no power, not able to understand the things of God, the spiritual things of God, because they're spiritually discerned. And so he's saying unbelief in God comes from the inability to understand spiritual things because you don't have the Holy Spirit. This is at the heart of our understanding of the doctrine of sin. Sin has rendered us unable to discern spiritual things as a natural man. And so you look around and you see people who get it and people who don't get it. Apart from the work of the Spirit, no one gets it. You don't get it. I don't get it. We don't see it. We don't look at the cross and weep at the cost of our sin. We don't look at the cross and repent and ask God for forgiveness. We don't look at the cross and are humbled by the blessings that God poured out upon us even though we're sinners. No, we see the cross and we see useless, irrelevant, stupid. Why would anyone believe that? In other words, apart from the Spirit, we are blind to see what's there. So a magician pulling a rabbit out of its hat is pretty spectacular if you're not blind. The facts are useless unless you can see them. God must first grant us the faith to believe by the Spirit before we will look at the cross and say, that cross is everything that I need and everything that I'm unable to get on my own. Do you see how massive this is and how dependent we are? And God is so gracious that he gives people who can't believe, who don't want to believe, who are foolish, who are perishing, the Spirit of God, his very Spirit, to believe the things he's freely done so that when we believe, we're saved. If you are a Christian in this room, if you believe that Jesus is the Christ, it is only because God has given you his Spirit to believe it, which means the miracle has already begun. There's miracles in this room this morning as God has done this work by his Spirit for us. And then last, fourth, this not just for ourselves. Having been given God, we give God to one another. So look at verse 13. And we impart this, everything that I've just tried to expound, we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit. Interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual. I love this picture. It's what gives me hope to preach. I open up my mouth. I share things about this word. The Holy Spirit takes them, intermingles them, pushes them into your heart, the things that are true about God, so that your faith in God is enlivened. And this is the way that God works. This is why the church is so important. It's why Sunday morning gatherings are so critical to your spiritual health. Because together we get to feast on the truth about Jesus. And we get to remind each other through songs and teaching and prayers, by the Spirit taking those things and applying them, that being a Christian is the most incredible thing in all of your life. I don't care what else you have going on. That's great. I will celebrate it with you. We'll smoke a brisket and we'll talk about it. But the most important thing and the most incredible thing about your life is that you're a Christian, that you've been saved. And our words are meshed with God's words, and the Spirit works, and the church is built up, and this is all miraculous. So you can walk in on a Sunday morning from the back and walk into the seats, and you can sit and listen and go home and have nothing take place. Or you can be a part of the miracle of God at work in the life of the church. He goes on to say in verse 15, the spiritual person, one who has the Spirit, judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. That's one of those verses that I'm like, really? After all of that, now I've got to figure out what verse 15 says? Because that seems kind of weird. Is he saying that Christians get to go around wagging their finger in people's faces and be like, you should do this and you should do that? And then someone says, well, maybe you should do it. You don't get to judge me. I'm judged by no one. Is that kind of the picture here? Those people make for fun people in the church. No, that's not the picture here. What he means here is that the one with the Spirit is the only one who can properly judge. The other way to interpret that word is inquire. The only one who can inquire properly into life and judge the real issues of this life. Only the one with the Spirit can judge all of those things. If you don't have the Spirit, you can't judge because you can't see. You can't inquire. Colorblind people can't properly assess the color spectrum of a rainbow. Only someone with eyes to see can make that call. And so the world may look on you as a Christian and your life for God, and they might see the way you live your life, and they might stand in judgment of you. Like, why would you live your life like that? But the spiritual person, the Christian, is free from the judgment of the world because they can't see what's really going on. Gordon Fee put it like this, and then we'll be done. The profane person cannot understand holiness, but the holy person can well understand the depths of evil. Those whose lives are invaded by the Spirit of God can discern all things, including those things without the Spirit, but the inverse is not possible. He quotes from Isaiah 40, "For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him?" Well, here's his answer. Us. Because we have the mind of Christ. Because we have the Spirit. Friends, I want to challenge you this morning. Have you realized that what it means to be spiritual is inextricably tied to the cross and nothing else? In like this new age religious sort of world that we live in, that people talk about, I'm spiritual, but I don't believe in anything. No, you are spiritual because of the cross and the revelation of the cross to you and nothing else. Have you realized that? Have you come to realize how cross-centered God is? Have you adopted his assessment of the world as your own? Do you see every issue in life as a gospel issue? Are you humble to realize that if you're one of the ones that get it, you only get it because God chose to reveal it to you, and not because you were cool or did something to earn it, but because God is merciful? Has getting it fundamentally changed who you are and what you live for and what defines you? Has getting it shaped your priorities so that the things of God are the things you deepest desire? Are you amazed that a person who deserves so little and has been given so much has the privilege to tell other people about the cross and to watch as God puts this cycle on repeat? D.A. Carson, to close, said, "Truly, to grasp that the eternal God, our maker and judge, has out of inexpressible grace sent his Son to die the odious death of an abominated criminal in order that we might be forgiven and reconciled to him, that this wise plan was effected by sinful leaders who thought they were controlling events and who are operating out of selfish expediency, while in fact God was bringing about his own good redemptive purposes, that our only hope of life in the presence of this holy and loving God lies in casting ourselves without reserve on his mercy, receiving in faith the gift of forgiveness purchased at inestimable cost. None of this is possible apart from the work of the Spirit." So here's how I'd sum it up. God has given us everything we need in the Spirit to understand the glory of his gospel and to give it away to others. That's the beauty of the church. Please pray with me. God, as we have meditated on your word, Lord, it does its work. It confronts the proud. It reminds us that we are not powerful people. At the same time, it assures us that we absolutely are loved, and that the purposes that you've kept hidden throughout all generations until the cross have been given to us because we have the Spirit. And because we've been given this miracle, we know that you will never forsake us and turn your back on us. You can no more let us die a second death than Jesus would die again. So, Lord, would you help us to worship you this morning for what you've done for us in the gospel? That we would be cross-centered, gospel-centered at the core, that our lives would reflect it in every possible way. Search us, Lord, by the Spirit. Help us to have your mind and to live according to your ways. In Jesus' name.